Hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Smith with the Institute for Responsible Technology, and I'm here with Dr. Michelle Perro, a pediatrician who has had incredible experiences introducing people to organic diets and seeing what happens as a result. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Glad to be with you.
We're going to get to some really interesting information like what gets better, how long it takes, and what changes you've seen since GMOs were introduced in the mid or late 1990s. But first, I want to give everyone an orientation to the page you're looking at. In the upper right-hand corner above this video, there's a link to an article. It's an article that I just published. It's peer-reviewed in the International Journal of Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine. And it describes how 3,256 people, when they switched to non-GMO and largely organic diets, that they got better from, or at least improved from 28 different conditions, primarily digestive disorders, and then a long list. Now that is a 15-page long article along with 6 pages of endnotes. It's thick, it's got a lot of jargon in it. If you're not a medical practitioner, and you're not a scientist, you may get bogged down. And so on the upper left, there's a link to an easy to read summary article, which really gives the details that are most important. Now, Michelle is in a film that Amy Hart and I are directing called Secret Ingredients, about families that heal from chronic and serious conditions when they switch to organic. And as soon as that becomes available, I'd like to let you know. So register down below for advance notice as soon as that becomes available. And Michelle is writing a book, and that will also be coming out soon, and we'll let you know. And in addition, when you register to get advance notice, I'm also going to gift you an ebook of my book, Genetic Roulette, The Documented Health Risks of Genetically Engineered Foods. It's up here over my shoulder, as well as a video update of the information on GMOs since that was published. But now let's get to the interview, and you could pause any time to register for those and then come back to the interview. So Michelle, we've spoken a number of times, and I get excited because I've been talking theoretically. I've been talking to scientists around the world for 21 years, translating their concerns into easy to read and understand language. And I originally didn't believe when people told me that they noticed a difference in eating GMOs or non-GMOs. So before you even thought about the dangers of, when you first heard about GMOs, did you think that they were dangerous? Were you concerned? And did anyone tell you something like that and leave you skeptical like it did with me?
It's been an interesting journey, Jeffrey, I'll tell you. I heard about GMOs through a mother's group that I reluctantly got roped into regarding pesticide spray. Never wanted to do that, did it anyway. And one of the moms, co-founder of this group, said, "Hey, did you read Jeffrey Smith's book, Seeds of Deception, and what do you think about GMOs?" And I thought nothing about GMOs. Like, what's there to think? Genetically modified food sounds good. Well, this is not a plug for your book, but I read your book. And in the beginning, I read about Dr. Pusti's work, and we don't need to go into detail about that. And I had this light bulb moment go on for me regarding genetically modified food and what I was seeing in children, clinical issues. So yes, that happened for me around 2006. But prior to that, never had a thought about it.
You know, it was in 2006 that I was preparing to publish the book, Genetic Roulette, and I had compiled all the health dangers. And coincidentally, that was when I started to speak to medical conferences. And that's when the doctors started prescribing non-GMO diets after hearing the evidence. And that's soon after that, I started to hear the results. Now, before you share the results of what happened when you prescribe non-GMO organic diets, you've been in business, helping kids and families for quite a while, starting before GMOs were introduced in mid-1990s. Did you notice a change in what children were going through in terms of their health, starting in maybe the late 1990s, especially early 2000s, as the predominance of GMOs increased in the diet?
I did. So I've been practicing about 37 years. I'm old, and I'm a clinician. I'm on the front line. I take care of people. That's what I do. I'm not a bench researcher. I like to be involved with families and children's healthcare. I've been an advocate for kids. Like, by definition, that's what a pediatrician is. You're an advocate for children. So I'm kind of tooling along, thinking about everything's hunky-dory. I did mostly acute care. I was a pediatric emergency physician and kind of branched off more into integrative medicine, long story. But what I noticed, and it was about around 2000, that kids weren't as robust. And I first noted digestive dysfunction, immune dysfunction, and then neurologic dysfunction. And it was pretty quick, Jeffrey. It wasn't over decades. It was over about 10 to 15 years that I saw this enormous, unbelievable decline in children's health across all types of health issues. It wasn't focused just on respiratory problems. It was on many issues, and every alarm bell went off.
So now, when you got this aha experience and you combined the information from the Dr. Pustai, which, by the way, in the book that I'll be giving you, the ebook, there's a picture of the rat's stomach linings and intestinal linings, where they ate GMOs versus not. And it's a dramatic difference. And I know that was part of your aha when you looked at that book as well. Did you sort of like rush in and start prescribing organic diets to everyone with the expectation of change? Did you weigh in? Tell me about the moments when you started to test your hypothesis. We're going to get into the experience you've had since then with thousands.
Yes, my hypothesis. First of all, yes, Dr. Pusey slides, the ones I learned about through you, had never heard of him before, and the ones that are in Genetic Roulette. I use those slides still in just about every talk I do on what's making kids sick and why they're so sick. So that data from 20 years ago is still germane today. So there's a plug for Dr. Pusey. He's to me is a hero. Okay, that aside. So when I started making these switches to organic diet, and which was easy for me because in my own family, in my own little funky town where I live in, little hippie town, where we're mostly organic, this was an easy switch. And I thought, yeah, kids would get better. How dramatically they got better, I didn't anticipate. And the way I saw that was not so much in the kids I was treating, because when I treat a child, they're not an experiment. I do whatever I can to get them better quickly. So I'm doing many things at once. I'm not just changing their diet.
You know, I want to say that I had the same experience when I first heard from doctors who had prescribed to 5,000 people to eat non-GMO. She said, everyone gets better. I said, let me go and talk to some of your patients. So I went to Chicago, went to the offices of her and another doctor, interviewed the patients, and sure enough, within days, sometimes weeks, long-standing chronic conditions went away. But some of those people were also switching to non-processed foods or switching to organic, not just non-GMO, or they were switching to gluten-free or dairy-free.
Right.
Around the same time, I went to some farms where they had taken pigs and put them on non-GMO diets. It wasn't a gluten-free diet. It wasn't a dairy-free diet. It wasn't an organic diet. They weren't treating them. It was just switching from GMO soy and corn to non-GMO soy and corn. And all of a sudden, they started getting better from digestive disorders, immune system problems, etc. And there was no confounding factors. So that was support for my thinking that, oh yeah, what's happening in the animals is similarly happening in the humans. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the laboratory studies, like as you did, I see the similar results. You see the problems with the digestion in the lab rats, in getting better in the livestock, and getting better in humans. But I didn't have the experience you had of testing it eventually on more people than any rats or any mice had ever been tested in laboratories on a GM versus non-GM diet. So people started to get better, but it was hard to tease apart what the cause. So how did you identify the food as opposed to all of the other supplements and treatments that you were doing?
I couldn't. I couldn't tell what was working. I often don't know. Was it the supplement? Was it the herb? Was it the remedy? Was it the dietary change off gluten? Can't tell. So that was puzzling for me because we've had these conversations like, well, Jeffrey, I don't know. But what did happen, which was remarkable, were the families got better. Mom, and we wrote about this in our book, mom's asthma cleared, sister's eczema cleared. And the most remarkable thing I've heard, which blew my mind, was a dad, all he did was switch to organic, because when you make a family switch, you know, everybody switches in the family. Mom is not going to buy non-organic, or dad, I keep saying mom, but dads too, they're food shopping. When they buy the food, they're not going to buy non-organic for one and organic for the other. That doesn't make sense. So everyone goes on organic food. I had this one dad, because organic food is more expensive, he had to bring his lunch to work. So he stopped eating takeout. He was on an all organic diet. He had 20% kidney function when we started. He was headed for dialysis, like his brother and his mom. He thought it was genetic. After 7 or 8 months, that's all, he had 80% return, 80% kidney function. And his nephrologist couldn't answer it. And when he told her, well, gee, I switched my diet to organic, she said, no way. Well, kidney disease is a huge problem now in areas where farmers are working. Central America, Sri Lanka, lots of countries are reporting this. So that,
and not only they're reporting it, but there's an article that links Roundup or glyphosate-based herbicides with kidney dysfunction and kidney failure.
and our pod saw that too. Dr. Pusti, he reported kidney changes 1996. And those first studies that came out about Roundup, about glyphosate actually, in the 80s showed kidney tumors. So as early as the 80s, we knew there was a link to kidney pathology and immune dysfunction for a long time. This was not new news.
Let me catch people up, and just in case they happen to not be aware of the details, GMOs like soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa, the 6 major ones, are engineered with an added gene, and all of them are engineered to withstand being sprayed with an herbicide, primarily Roundup. So Roundup is drenched on most GMOs. The active ingredient of Roundup is called glyphosate, labeled as a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization, and also has many other problems. It's an antibiotic, it's a chelator, it's an endocrine disruptor. It can block certain metabolic pathways. It's a mitochondrial toxin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we are looking, because we don't have like clinical trials where all these people just change one thing in their diet and change for many, many weeks, we have to look at a lot of different pieces of information. We talked about how people get better from, I can also see what pets get better from, what livestock gets better from, what's affecting the lab animals, and also what the characteristics are of the toxins that are in GMOs, like Roundup. And so Roundup and glyphosate are known to cause kidney damage. In studies in Europe, Seralini fed rats genetically modified Roundup-ready corn, and after 2 years, they had damage to the livers and kidneys and pituitary. And they also fed just the Roundup, same, livers, kidneys, and pituitary. They also ended up with multiple massive tumors and early death.
Right.
So yeah, we're seeing in the lab animals, and you're seeing in your patients. So that was a way that you could change the entire family's diet, and you're not giving everyone else the supplements and the herbs. They're all just changing the diet. They get better. That's a way of isolating it. So now that you had, how many people have you put on an organic diet, do you think?
Oh dear. Oh my God. Thousands.
Hundreds or thousands? Okay, thousands.
Thousands. Working every day. And since I started doing this in 2006, over 11 years, thousands of patients, Jeffrey.
All right. So based on your experience, you put people, because you can see how the supplements work in some cases, maybe they don't change their diet and you give them the supplements and they don't change their diet, and then eventually they change their diet, and then it catches up to the supplements. Based on all of your clinical experience, tell me, what are the most common ailments that get better from eating a non-GMO diet, an organic diet?
Yes. What I should say is, when I treat families and they don't stay on the organic diet, usually, even if there is clinical improvement, it doesn't hold. I tell the family they have to maintain because people lapse. They get lazy, they get tired, kids go to grandma's, they go to, sleepovers. It's really hard to maintain all the time and keep that level of vigilance. It's challenging, Jeffrey. So it's not easy for families. Let me just say that. The biggest area of improvement were digestive disorders. The number one complaint of childhood is abdominal pain. And kids, I'm seeing chronic constipation like nobody's business. I could retire on constipation. So
I've never heard that sentence put together.
You heard it here. So we're seeing bloated tummies, gassy tummies, chronic constipation, occasionally diarrhea, reflux, where kids' food is coming up in the back of their throats. Adults and kids, GERD, it's called GERD, gastrointestinal reflux disorder. Undigested food in the poop, not a good sign. Mucus in the poop, not a good sign. Yellow or green poop, not a good sign. So all these things which are reflecting other issues going on. If you're not absorbing your nutrients from your digestive tract, you can't run the other systems. So in functional medicine, integrative medicine, another word for it, what we focus on frequently beginning is the gut. So that's where I have to start our treatment. And so the main thing to do is fix the gut. These kids have gut issues. One is called leaky gut or intestinal permeability, and they often have abnormal microbiome. There are germs in the gut. And this can all be linked to the change in our food supply.
You know, Michelle, what you're talking about is the big focus of our film Secret Ingredients that I did with Amy Hart that'll be out soon.
Loved it. Loved it.
Thank you.
I did. I loved it.
So, you know, for those that are already on board the choir, this is the film to show the family members who've long ago discounted you and the friends who run in the other direction when you start talking. Just
oh, you know my friends, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so she's going to talk about her again. No, just say, just show them the film. So far, every audience that we've tested it from, dramatic commitment to organic on the spot. And so I also know that some of this information is in your book. So I want to remind people that, and you can even pause it now, register below and we'll send you advance notification for the film and the book. And you'll also get a free ebook from me, as well as a video update. Now, in the film, we have someone that had constipation and bloating and mood issues.
Yes.
Do they come together generally? Are they related?
So related, Jeffrey. So the intestine, which is your second brain, by the way, if it is leaky for a bunch of reasons, and we won't go into all of it, so a lot of things cross that shouldn't be crossing, including incompletely broken down foods, toxins and toxicants, chemicals that shouldn't be coming through, they go on up and cross right into the brain through the blood-brain barrier and can cause changes in the brain which affect mood. Also, your intestine is responsible for the production of chemicals called neurotransmitters, which run your nervous system. So if that's altered for any reason, those chemicals can be imbalanced as well, the neurochemicals. So when you get kids feeling better, their mood improves. Duh, this is like grandma can tell you this. This is common sense, not so common. So yes, you improve gut function, you improve brain function. Leaky gut, leaky brain. It's really that simple. We don't have to overcomplicate this. So yes, brain gets better. Irritability, sleep disorders, you know, a lot of kids, I think 2 out of 3 children under 10 now have dysomnia or a sleep issue, not good for families. Focus in school, there's a big project happening. I have to give a shout out to Conscious Kitchen. It's a movement, a group out of Marin County, some amazing people running it, bringing organic food to school lunch.
Excellent.
And they're showing already improvements in children's focus at school. Big
All right. So I feel like, you know, there's this thing, the old days, where's Waldo? Look at the pages and you find Waldo. What you've done is, if the people listening now read the summary of the survey and list all the 28 different conditions, they could check off so many of them. Digestion, you said, was the number one in your practice that improves.
Yes.
It's the number one in the survey. You mentioned mood issues. You mentioned concentration.
Fatigue, joint issues, joint discomfort. It's called arthralgias. You know, there's something very interesting about your study, which bugs the heck out of me. Can I be frank?
Yeah.
What bugs me so much is that you've gotten some heat over not being a scientist, right?
Well, the thing is, you know, the biotech industry has a whole department that gets paid to try and discredit people like me. Those of us who are asking for more science, they call us anti-science. And so they'll use anything they can. And so, yes, you're not a scientist. Why would you listen to Jeffrey Smith, who's not a scientist?
Well, I say shame on those of us in our industry in medicine and science for not doing the study that you did. We should have been doing this study. This is a study we needed to do. These questionnaire studies are challenging because you're taking people's word for it. However, food studies are notoriously difficult to do because it's hard to control what people eat unless you have them in a controlled setting like a school or a prison or a nursing home. Otherwise, it's very difficult. So I say hats off to you, Jeffrey, for doing what the science community should have done. This should have been a no-brainer science study, and that you did. So I say good for you.
Thank you. And you know something, that for me, I kind of, it was a natural thing for me to do because I've heard more testimonies from people than anyone in the world about the non-GMO diet magic. And I wasn't believing people in the beginning, but when the doctor started telling me, then I was like, oh my goodness. And then when I released my last movie, Genetic Roulette, I started asking audiences what they noticed. And I went to about 150 lectures where I was asking audiences at the beginning, all right, what did you notice that got better? People would say, you know, my constipation's better. And I'd say, okay, how many else had digestive disorders improve? Digestion was always the number one. Reduced fatigue and brain fog was always number two. Reduction in weight was very common. Anxiety and depression, headaches, allergies, all these different things, down to liver conditions and kidney conditions. And it was completely predictable. By the time in my last 50 lectures, I would say, I will tell you which one is the most popular. And I'd say, watch how many hands go up. How many people notice the problem with digestion? And all these hands would go up. And I'd say, now watch the next most popular. And I'd ask that. And it would be so absolutely predictable. Even at medical conferences, maybe 20 different medical conferences, I'd ask doctors, and they had the same reports about their patients. So when I got back the results of the survey, of course we had to do the survey just to get some numbers down to share this with, because it's hard to say, oh yeah, I found it in 150 lectures, people don't pay attention. So we had to do the survey to get the data to show the relative frequency of these disorders, but I was not surprised at all by the results. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you how quickly people can get better from these different disorders and diseases. I've talked to different doctors about this, and I'm interested to know, like, what's the disorder that gets better most quickly, most often, and then the next, and then the next.
Mm-hmm. It's very, as this kind of medicine goes, it's extremely individual, very varied. So it's really hard to say, yes, it'll happen in this set time. I've seen it as quick as 3 days, not sooner than that. Average about 4 weeks, and some people 3 months. But I'd say an average is 4 weeks. However, for those parents and families, kids who report changes in the 3-day ones, they're the ones who report decreased bloating and gassiness. And it's often the people who have the most significant symptoms that get better the quickest. So I find that people who are the most severe will report that they start to notice changes immediately. For patients who are more subtle, it takes longer. So that is what I've seen, very variable. What you've noticed as well, and what you've become, is essentially a clinician. What clinicians do is we look for patterns, right? And then you'll start to hear it. You hear it again and again and again, and you formulate clinical pathways. That's how we're trained to think. So you, through your lecturing, are starting to think like a clinician, and hence your study, because you saw the pattern. And I'd say, again, another kudo to you, Jeffrey, because that's what I do. I look for patterns. And as soon as I start to see it, I act clinically. When we act, what are we doing? We're changing people's diets. There could be nothing. It's so innocuous to change people's diets. You know, this treatment plan, this is not tough stuff. No drugs are involved with this experiment. And so easy to do. And long answer for your question, about, I would say 4 weeks is the average.
And if someone's cleaned their diet and their symptoms are gone, or let's say they're gone, and they go back on the old diet, how quickly do the symptoms generally return, and which ones come up most quickly?
Right away.
Really?
Yes. Now there's the interesting piece.
You know, and this is actually mercy. This is the good news, because it's like, oh, I get it now. We have some doctors in our film saying they have to regress. They have to backslide so they can see the relationship.
And it happens all the time, because I've cleaned up people's diets, and then they go out for that beautiful Mexican meal where they eat tons of corn, those yummy corn tortillas or the tamales and yum yum. And of course, they're all GMO because corn is over 90% genetically modified in our country, 94%, I think, and sprayed. And by that evening, they're bloated. They don't feel well. They're a little bit foggy in the brain. And then I intervene, I treat, to clear them. And then they're feeling better within a day or two. It's remarkable. Yes.
Well, this is a good note to end on. And I want to wrap up here and remind people of what's available. But here's my recommendation, and you can adjust it if you want. This is what I've been telling audiences that what I think is the best thing for people to do. Go to 100% organic diet, or at least absolutely as much as you possibly can for a trial period, at least a month. You're talking about getting better in 4 weeks. That's a support for the month. And take notes. Write down in advance all the symptoms you have and the severity, 1 to 10, and your energy level, and your mood, how much, if there's any anxiety, depression, whatever, and what you're eating. Then every day, write down the severity of the symptoms on an organic diet. And of course, it's better if you have a food journal as well, if you have the time to do that. But that way you can monitor the change and see the results for yourself, because a lot of people will forget after a few weeks and they're feeling better and they won't necessarily relate it to the food. Mm-hmm. So would you support me in that prescription, or would you adjust it or change it completely?
Jeffrey, words from my mouth. That is indeed what I tell patients, because whenever I have a patient with a chronic condition, whether it's chronic abdominal pain, chronic headaches, migraines, chronic insomnia, I ask them to keep a diary. Because as we institute change, sometimes the improvements are not immediate, and you're right, we don't know what caused it. So I have them log their symptoms or their child's symptoms. It doesn't have to be War and Peace or a dissertation. A couple of words in their iPhone is all I really need, and then we start charting it. What I also have patients do, and people do, and this may be a little yucky, is I have them take pictures for me of their poop, especially their kids.
I have not recommended that, and it's possible that I will never recommend that, but go ahead. You just go ahead. Yes.
Well, the proof is in the poop, not in the pudding.
Okay.
Because parents don't often look at their kids' poop. Now, I usually talk from the kids' perspective, but I've treated adults as well. Mm-hmm. And so when they bring those photos into me originally of these very abnormal looking poops, and then we photograph the poops as the kid goes along, then a few weeks later, we have a normal poop. Parents don't go in and look once kids are potty trained. And so it's shocking for them to find out that little Susie or little Johnny is not making normal poop and now is. But it's not just about the normal poop. They feel better.
So I want you to know this is brilliant. This is brilliant. One problem is with my iPhone, if I take a picture, I can put it into an album, but it stays in the roll of all pictures. So if I'm showing someone pictures on my, maybe I'll just keep an old iPhone around. Or anyway.
Listen, pediatricians, that's our world. Pee pee and poo poo. Come on, this is what we do.
Okay, I'm there.
Fair enough.
So under certain circumstances, I might recommend it or refer them to you.
Please, yeah. They can send their pictures to me, Jeffrey.
All right, so you've been listening to Michelle Perro, who has been named one of America's top pediatricians over many different years, and has amazing experiences, and is now, thank you, Michelle, for being so bold in sharing your experience. You have emboldened other healthcare practitioners who are now finally speaking out about what they're seeing. I want to just share one quick story. I was giving a talk to some very successful people, and one person said, I had a very serious GI issue, and my gastroenterologist said, I can tell you why you're having it, but I can never write it down because it's too controversial. He said, what is it? He said, GMOs, but you can't quote me on it. So that was a few years ago. Now, hopefully with this peer-reviewed article about the digestive disorders and why there's a causative relationship, maybe they'll be more bold. Thank you for being bold. So,
absolutely, Jeffrey. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I'm really looking forward to your book. What's the name of the book? Who's the co-author?
We have a great book. It's been Vincennes Adams. She's a medical anthropologist at UCSF. She's brilliant. She's sassy. She's a critical thinker. And this medical anthropologist pediatric marriage that we performed, we looked at we interviewed over about 20 of my patients from my previous work. And we wrote about, not all of them, some of them, from both a clinical perspective and then to a broader sociologic viewpoint. And it's called What's Making Our Children Sick, with an extremely long subtitle. But it's important how industrial food, and we call it industrial food, it's not real food, is causing an epidemic of chronic illness and what parents and their doctors can do about it. It'll be out in December.
Great. Okay, so to get that book, register below so that we'll let you know, and we'll have it available on our site. We'll also let you know when the movie Secret Ingredients comes out. I'm going to gift everyone an ebook of this book up here, which is a compilation of all the health dangers of GMOs in an easy to read 2-page spread. So I'll teach you in the video that will accompany it how you can flip through the whole book in 30 minutes and get the full picture, or dive deep into particular areas that you'll find of interest.
Mm-hmm.
I've designed it so that there's summaries in each case and headlines that tell the whole story. Anyway, you'll get that on the video. And remember, upper left, you can get the summary of the article that is clickable on the upper right. And I want to wish everyone safe eating. Please share this information with others. Because as you talked about Dr. Pustai from years ago, when he was gagged with a threat and silenced and kicked out and fired and all that, no one knew about the dangers of GMOs in Europe where he was working. But when the gag order was lifted by an order of parliament and he got his data back and was published, there was a complete revolution in Europe because they were covering the story, and GMOs were kicked out of there because of consumer concern based on the science. So it's all about education, and that's up to us. Since the mainstream media is not carrying the water on this one, we need to do that. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.